Hello, my name is Daniel Tal, and this is Emerging AI in Professional 3D Practice. This session has been recorded and probably online in various places. There's a lot of information to go over, so I'm going to jump right in, hopefully. The agenda is we'll introduce ourselves, we'll talk about the AI research and development mandate that the company I work for, Confluence, provided to us. We'll talk about the types of AIs and how we use them in practical matters. You could see some of our work on the screen here. Top image is a Midjourney image. The bottom image is a Lumion rendering. And then we have another Midjourney on the right. Confluence is a great company that we work for. We work for 9 offices across the Midwest. And we'll talk about Confluence a little bit more. At the Digital Studio, our main job is to produce 3D graphics. This requires us to pretty much constantly research and develop new methods for what we're doing, finding different ways to approach how we're working. We have a big focus. We have our own internal approach where we're trying to tell the staff that we're working with or in ourselves to find innovative ways to do night renderings, which we'll talk about as part of this presentation and why that can become a thing. And just an example of 2 of our favorite projects, Jenn Becker above, she designed and did this marina. She worked on this and 3D modeled and animated this marina. And I had fun with this model doing lighting in learning how to add lighting elements. So again, my name is Daniel Tal. I am the digital studio manager for Confluence. I also own PlaceMaker, Urban Paint, and DanielTal.com. I've written books on SketchUp, rendering, and drones. I wrote drone book for professional practice with John Altschild. I was also presenting at 3D Basecamp. Part of my life and some of the work I've done as a designer, doing built work, urban design work, memorials, touched so many different types of projects. I own DanielTal.com. This is a great resource for 3D. If you need it, there's tutorials on the website, YouTube links. You can link to the books. And I also develop and sell PlaceMaker and Urban Paint, which we'll talk about briefly in this presentation again, because one is parametric and one is using AI. Jenn Becker is the co-manager with me for the 3D Digital Studio. She actually runs point on our AI research and development. And we do this in tandem and consolidating this information. But Jenn helps me run doing the modeling, the rendering, the animations, and the drones. Jenn, do you want to speak about this slide? Go ahead.
Yeah, so we put out a AI newsletter every 2 weeks to our bosses. Part of our AI mandate is attending conferences, testing new AI generative models, all sorts of things.
None of this would be possible without leadership. When I talk about an R&D mandate, there's real money and time that's being put into this. And that wouldn't be possible without Chris Delavedova, who just recently was inducted as a fellow into the American Society of Landscape Architecture, and our direct boss and vice president of the company, John Jacobson. And they emphasize this, that it's so important for them to put the leadership and say, you need to figure out the AI stuff. Chris came to us and said, we're behind, you better catch up. We're not really behind, but we get the urgency. And John Jacobson asked us if we were all going to lose our jobs. Jenn Becker runs the digital studio along with me for Confluence. She does modeling, rendering, animations, drones, and she's actually running point on the Confluence AI research and development.
So as part of our AI research and development, I'm responsible for biweekly AI newsletters on AI trends that go to our bosses. I find and research new AI tools and figure out how to integrate them into our workflows. And I also attend AI conferences.
Leadership is an important part of having an R&D mandate. It would not be possible without these two gentlemen. Chris Delavedova, recently inducted fellow into the American Society of Landscape Architecture, the president of our company, and John Jacobson, the vice president. And I'm pointing this out if you're watching this and how important it is to have leadership, not just advocate, but tell you to go do this and realize the importance around understanding the AI trends themselves. So that means we have an AI mandate. And in this presentation, we're only scratching the surface. This is a deep but shallow dive. many of the sections here can have their own full-length presentations. There's stuff that we're not showing, and there's just more information that you can probably incorporate. So talking about the general state of AI and this kind of prognostication, and if you're old enough to remember this, or if you weren't born, AutoCAD's been around for a long time. If you think about AutoCAD version 1.4, if you look on the screen where it's highlighted, those shapes back then with the computer tech you had would have taken 12 to 15 minutes to draw. You would have given the computer a coordinate, told it point A to point B to point C, or an arc and a radius, and then waited, broken out the popcorn. So AI based off all our research and what we've seen so far, we're still in what I would call the very early stages of this. Jen, why don't you speak about this one?
So AI has really kind of followed this hype cycle, and you can kind of see at the peak of that's generative AI, right? It's promising all sorts of things, and it's kind of under delivering. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is we're starting to see things kind of plateau, things get more realistic, and the hype kind of going away now.
Talk about
big landscape architecture firms like SWA are also researching this. And it's interesting because we're kind of paralleling them in our research as well. And a lot of these tools, right, you see case studies on them, but they don't show you everything that it took to actually get there. So it's interesting to see that, this really is the beginning of it. And I think at this point, if you're researching it, you're an expert.
And pretty much that's what we were told at a conference. Like, if you're into this right now, you really are putting yourself in the forefront. Reading academic papers like Project Muse or online blogs like the Landscape Architecture AI Buffer Zone, where they're talking about how much AI is starting to be used just in the landscape architecture or the AEC industry in general. And we're trying to understand those big picture trends. So what we did... I
think that it's important to note, too, that, the design profession is really kind of behind, I guess. People are investing in AI, but they're investing in really big sectors like healthcare, automation, manufacturing, things like that. And so our profession is a really small piece of what's being developed out there.
And that's a great point. And this is why internally what we've done, right, is develop this AI mandate. And what you're seeing here is literally the chapters on a Google Doc for all the different things that we're starting to research, organizations we're part of, and how AI in some ways is now everywhere. And again, we'll get to the meat about this. So part of our strategic recommendations internally is understanding how AI fits into our workflow. It needs to be invisible, affordable, seamless, really not something that's going to cause you more time or damage. There is a price tag involved with it. And another big thing about it is just remember, like with AutoCAD 1.4, things go slowly. So be skeptical of the types of technology you're seeing. There are a lot of AI companies now that are desperate for money. They're not going to show you what it actually does. And then wonder, was it worth it once you subscribe? The other part of this is the safe use of AI. This is AI SOC2 compliance, which is actually something that was created in the 70s and established a framework for compliance and safety for businesses to run. So that's good that that's being integrated and advocated in terms of AI for business practice in the US. Go ahead, Jen.
These are just a handful of the newsletters that I've put out. So right now I'm writing these basically every 2 weeks just to kind of keep up with what's happening, how we can use it, if we think that, it's hype or if it's not. And then also some case studies that we put together.
How many hours per week do you think you spend researching for these newsletters?
It depends on the week. It depends kind of what comes out, but I would say anywhere from 2 to 15 hours a week.
And how fast do you notice things changing from the time you did your first newsletter to now?
It's slowing down. It's definitely slowing down, So, a lot of people ask how we get our information, how we put these things together and how we know, what's up and coming. And so we subscribe to a variety of AI newsletters that other people are putting out. We attend AI conferences. This was specifically the GTC conference that NVIDIA put on in March that I attended, and then social media as well.
One of the topics I want to talk about just real quick, because it's important to me, is NVIDIA leading the charge. They have something called Omniverse. That's a big conversation in itself. And then also this notion of digital twins, which you're going to hear a lot about digital twins in the coming years. And it's important to understand what they are and how their intent is really to create what you're seeing on the screen, a live action simulation representation for, in this case, of the Earth. NVIDIA calls it Earth 2, that they're using for climate modeling, weather studies, you name it. And that's something you're going to see more of and already exists in a lot of sectors. But it's a quick shout out to this as you come across this definition of these live simulations that are fed data, and AI actually helps pursue and understand the data sets. There's a bunch of types of AI. So I'm going to talk here, and this is both AI and advertisement. I own and operate PlaceMaker. PlaceMaker started with this notion in 2014 of the fact that facial recognition software had now gone to remote sensing and aerial photography, and we can now have access to these powerful data sets on demand. All our projects start with PlaceMaker. So right there, this is the Las Vegas Convention Center that we're at for Basecamp, and it's a high resolution aerial that's almost completely necessary for us to do any kind of project work that we do. The great thing about PlaceMaker is all the other data sets that you can get. Here's OpenStreetMap and Microsoft building massings. And these are AI-derived building sets that sometimes they have height information, sometimes they don't. The same is with roads. We bring in the road data and we transform that into a road. And here you can see all the different data sets: water, roads, building footprints, streets. You can export this back to a CAD program and have a CAD base out of it. I'm going to turn, that was Rails right there. I'm going to turn this all back on to show this to you and say this is one aspect of the PlaceMaker data. We also get cesium data, which is terrain data that we can use. And the last part of it is that we are able to import in the Google Earth 3D data. Again, this is a commercial product. This is mine. This is my quick spot. And why that's important is because the type of information you now have really becomes these high detailed 3D models. You could see what they are. These are all AI-derived photogrammetric data from point clouds. Again, you can go to my website for all this. The next thing I'm going to show you is parametrics. And this is another tool of mine called Urban Paint. Now, parametrics is not AI, but I want to talk about parametrics in this presentation because AI is not precise. Generative AI lacks precision, where everybody's been spending the past several years creating these parametric tools. Urban Paint lets you create streetscapes in SketchUp in minutes. It would take hours. It's parametric. You put all the data's in. It's a very linear process for everybody to use. There's other parametric tools I want to talk about. This one's showing you how it's going to build a streetscape and an intersection. But what we're going to see in the future is the merger of parametric tools with AI. They're almost a marriage made in heaven, because where AI is not precise and parametrics is, giving a shout out to SketchUp because they're thinking about it that way, and some of the tools that we're seeing, Rhino and Grasshopper, but they're not the only ones. It's a lot of the software companies are thinking about how to create the parametrics here. And just to go through Urban Paint, it's creating the streetscape profile. You can then save the profile itself and reuse it. But once I hit save, build the profile for me, you can see it. It's going to go in there. Normally, this would take me, an hour or two or maybe longer to build. It's a completely editable model, but it's precision. It's the precision that I need for what I do. And here, I'm going to reload a profile. And one of the things I can do is add an intersection, which is painful to do if you have to do it manually. And you can still modify the profile as it was. And once it puts it out there, so for me in the future, tying AI to this tool, creating other options for the way that you can create parametrics is really important. So don't forget about parametrics in the sauce of AI. We will talk about that in some of this in terms of what's next. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk about the types of AI. We're going to get into the depth of all this. There's the chatbots, there's generative AI, and there's passive. So the chatbots, everybody knows what they are. We're going to talk about them. The generative AI models, which actually require the chatbots in some ways for you to create this information. And then passive AI, which is really what I just showed you with PlaceMaker. and with other tools like Lumion and D5 and rendering programs and other things like drones where it's behind the scenes. And that's really important to know. These tools all use these kind of different types of AI on the right-hand side to generate their data information. Jen, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so this is just kind of a comprehensive list of different categories of different AI softwares that are out there, right? This includes generative, chatbots, and passive. And I would say that we've probably looked into at least half of these. And again, kind of going back to that hype model, right? A lot of these are AIs that overpromise and underdeliver.
So the chatbots, which is prompt engineering, which really you're turning right brain creatives into left brain linguists, which is kind of a challenge, right? And how those work. And we are agnostic in our chatbots for the most part. We use all of them. Here's the 4 major ones that we like. I think it's, Jen, which ones are these? Perplexity,
ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini.
Gemini, that's correct. And each one of them you can see has a different take on what the world will look like in 2040. Perplexity, which is my favorite, is the most pessimistic or pragmatic, depending on how you see it. So we'll talk about, first of all, one of the primary, most simplest things about this is the Google search bar or searching versus something like Perplexity, which is one of my favorite chatbots that I use. So Perplexity is great because it shows you what it's thinking. It gives you sources. It gives you videos. It doesn't create images. It's very focused as a research tool. It has a library. If I search Google and say, give me the best drone on the market, I'm going to get the first 3 results, which will be like Reddit, which I don't want to delve into Reddit because it's a lot, might or might not be good or whatever it might be in Reddit. But either way, the next results are all advertisements. That doesn't really help. If I go to Perplexity, I'm like, give me the top 5 top drones. It's giving me the top 5 drones. It's actually telling me the differences, their battery life, relevant, clear, legible information. I can then ask it, well, what's your sources again? I look at the sources. I can go through there. What's nice to see is Reddit actually is on there. I didn't have to read through Reddit. It found it for me. And then I can ask it, well, why did you pick the DJI Mavic 3 Pro as the number 1? Because I might not agree with that assessment or not, but there it is, and it's giving me the reason. That's great. That's research. That's Google instead. I mean, if an image says anything else about what you're looking for products and how to find stuff, that's it. So how do I use it as a search engine? Yes, I still use Google search bar on occasion, but for the most part, I search using Perplexity. And I do pay for it. There's a free version. In the free version, you can actually access the pro side of Perplexity for 5 times a day. But this is my search history, and I can go back to these, and I can add to it. So if people have been saying like it's a new type of, we've all been acclimated to using the search engines, this might be a change. Next thing, I like to write books. And this is, again, I'm using Perplexity for this one. And I wrote this kind of emotional plea about how we need to improve the studio. And I'm like, there's no way the chatbot can outright me. I got schooled. I did not expect this result. This was a professional memo. It didn't necessarily get the results I needed, but at the same time, it was better than what I had produced. And I was well written, one shot, and kind of shocking. And that was an aha moment of like, okay, no matter what's going on with AI, maybe it is slowing down, maybe there's too much investment, it is legit. And it did outright and outthink and outproduce what I would not have been able to reach this result. Prompt engineering, not to be confused with the actual career, which is actually people that do prompt engineering tasks. But let's talk about this. Just real quick, because I'm going to turn it over to Jen. And she does a lot of the prompt engineering, but it is worth to research and understand how to create prompts for generative models for what you're doing. Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's important to know how to speak to these models, right? And what words they're going to understand. And so there's a lot of resources out there that will use this one specifically as Hugging Face, but it allows you to type in kind of what you're trying to get it to do or what way you're trying to talk to it, and then it'll actually create a prompt for you, at least as a starting point. And then Daniel and I will actually use a chatbot like Perplexity or ChatGPT to kind of just spew all of our thoughts out. Like, we want it to do this, 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 and this. And then it will actually write us a prompt that we can copy and paste into a generative AI system that it better understands than Daniel and I just word vomiting into it.
And we have examples of this in our in the presentation. So generative AI inspiration. I want to start off with this one. I'm going to hit play on this. I love this tool. This is NVIDIA Canvas. It's free. It's a basic tool that is actually used now in a lot of different AI tools. You're going to see it more often. This is one of NVIDIA's first takes on doing this kind of stuff. It is pretty much you get your Bob Ross on. You become a landscape painter. And if as a landscape architect, this is, finger painting fun or whatever you want to do with it, it's important to know the importance of this tool is because of what it's able to do on a generative level and being able to shape environments. I mean, if you want to read, God created the world in 6 days, he just might have used NVIDIA Canvas to do it. I don't know. But you could see this tool allows you to basically paint with a different brush size. You can pick in the canvas, you can pick the type of landscape, you can pick trees, mountains, hills, rocks, gravel, sand. They're programmed in there, and the algorithm does all the work. Right now I'm working on the left-hand side where I'm just doing this autofill with and just filling the areas with different color. But again, you can get lost in this for hours. Every once in a while I come back to this tool and I think it's just fun. But this was one of the foundational generative AI tools that came out 6 or 7 years ago. You do need a very good video card. You need an RTX card to do this. However, it is worth it. It is free. It is worth the download and trying it out. Generative AI, I call it the unprecision because really it's not very precise. But if you get over that, that's where its strength lies.
So we're going to go through a bunch of different case studies. Daniel and I have really tested every generative image model out there at this point for work to see kind of what the results are, right? Which one's the best, which one's the most photorealistic, and which one understands our prompts the best. So all of these prompts that you're going to see have been written through ChatGPT or Perplexity, Claude, or Gemini to get a better result. And these are just kind of showing you our process, what the results were. And like anything in design, these are subjective, right? There are people that will tell you in our firm that they hate these images, that they aren't realistic, that they could do a better job, right? And there's other people in our firm that love them. So,
and if I can just quickly add, and these are just stuff that we're testing. We're using these as inspirational or precedent images for projects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're basically using generative AI to create efficiencies in our workflow. This saves us so much time being able to create exactly what we want versus trying to find something that fits in the loop on Google or on the internet somewhere. So these are all 3 Midjourney tools. And renderings, these are all for the warehouse district in Minneapolis. So we gave it really specific information on the location that we were using, how the space would be used, and what type of things we were trying to create. Again, these are both from Midjourney. This is the newest version, 6.1 that they came out with. And again, this is a food truck park also in Minneapolis. And then the other one is just kind of this fall alley type scene that, you would see anywhere. Go ahead. So playing with kind of context with some of these tools is interesting. So, trying to create these images that could be seen as a drone shot instead of, instead of actually having to go out there and fly a drone, just to kind of get the point across, right? Or to have a visual impact on a project. The other one is, this kind of fall scene and steamboat, right? We work on a lot of mountain projects in our Denver office. And so I think being able to create context that is location specific is important.
Do you know what's crazy about the one on the left is it looks like Telluride?
Yeah, it does. So getting into some of these Midjourney tools, everybody's pretty aware of their Imagine tool, which is just their generative AI that creates an image. But some of these other tools are often overlooked. So this is the blend tool. This is showing you basically the process of blending a Midjourney image with an existing image. So as you can see, that image on the left is an existing photograph that one of our principals took of an alley. The middle image is a Midjourney tool that Imagine rendering that we created. And then the last image is those two images put together. And then we changed the paving out using some of their in-painting tools called Vary Region. One of the other really exciting tools that I like in Midjourney and we've started to use more and more is called Tune. So this is actually a style tuner that allows you to create a style just from a prompt. So this one was for a style that was inspired by Architectural Digest. And then from there, it creates these images that are seen in these grids, right, of 3. And then if you go to the next slide, Daniel, it creates a custom style code that you can use in future renderings using the Imagine prompt. Based on the images that you select here, it creates a specific style that you can then transform to other renderings that you create in the future. One of the interesting things about this is that these tools are both Blend and Tune are not supported in the new version of Midjourney, so you do have to use a older model. So we're going to go into some of that next. So this is using a style tuner that I created for an alley with, colorful and futuristic stuff. But this is using that older model, the version 5.2. So just to show you the difference is that this is that same prompt, but using a different style code. So this actually added people to it, right? It added some fun stuff on the buildings. It's a little bit more realistic, but if you zoom in pretty close, you can see that the people are still a little weird.
And that's
using that old model.
And that's worth mentioning that one of the things that we've learned doing all these generative features, and we'll talk about that more, is not to add people or cars necessarily in some of what we're doing. And here's an example of that. Like this actually does work great on the right. And I remember the principal we showed this to was like, let's just use that.
Right. And this is wild. So this is really to show you the difference between that older version using the style code versus not being able to use the style code, but using the same prompt in the newer version, right? The people are better, but it doesn't really have that kind of same whimsical effect as the style tuner version did.
At the same time, the one on the right's pretty photorealistic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that version 6.1 of Midjourney is considerably better than 5.2. And so hopefully they'll support these new tools in the new version. One of the other generative AI models that we use quite a bit is Ideogram, and we're going to get into this one a little bit more because it specifically works really well for words. But just to show you kind of a comparison versus a prompt in Midjourney, like we just saw, versus Ideogram, all these generative models are getting better and better. I think that these are pretty nice too. They're pretty photorealistic. That one on the left is a little bit cartoony, I guess, with the people, but for precedent imagery or just trying to find something that, checks all your boxes, this is a pretty nice one.
The one on the right, again, looks like a photograph, and it's hard to tell that that's generative.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is just showing you kind of some of the prompts that we use. We crafted this one in ChatGPT. We were trying to create a plaza area for an entertainment district in Minneapolis that, had these kind of celebratory watch parties for the Timberwolves. So something that Ideogram can do that Midjourney can't do is really branding, logos, branding, words, things like that. And so, you can go to the next one. Again, this is basically that exact same prompt that we were using in Midjourney with the style tuner. And then in version 6.1, this is just the Ideogram version to show you a comparison of what Ideogram looks like versus Midjourney. So again, where Ideogram really, really shines is through text. So these are all generative models, all generative renderings, and you can see that a lot of these look pretty real. We see in other generative models that it can't spell things and it can't
do words.
Do words at all, right? It just looks like kind of weird jibber jabber on the wall. And so these, I was very specific in my prompts. I did put in bold, in capital letters, like what I wanted it to say, right? So you do have to spell it out a little bit and hold its hand a little bit, but it does pretty well. Go ahead, Daniel. So this was a case study that I did using Ideogram for our company's logo. And so you can see the top left image is our normal logo. I didn't upload that or anything to Ideogram. I just told it that we were a landscape architecture firm. Our company colors were gray with a pop of orange, and that I wanted to create a fun logo that I could use on things. And it came up with all of these, instantaneously. And some of these are kind of cool. I don't know what we'll use them for, but it's pretty neat that it really kind of takes the idea of the word and then puts a graphic to it.
So this is a case study where I had to create a logo on the fly. I used ChatGPT for this. I needed a logo to go in with the other armed forces for this rendering. I needed one for Citizen Patriot, and I put it through the process. Took me 5 minutes. Otherwise, I don't know what I would have done or how I would have done this. Asked my boss which one he wanted to use. He picked this one. And here's an example of where ChatGPT actually could not do the spelling, but Ideogram wasn't around back then when I did this, and then we plopped it into the rendering. So here we go.
So another generative model that we've been testing, and, I sat in on a conference at GTC about this Runway AI. So Runway AI is really geared towards a Hollywood level of generative video. Most of their models are generative tools for video editing, for creating short clips. And I think that they're really pushing the limits when it comes to generative video.
So we
have tried to get into Sora. We've tried to get into Adobe Firefly. We've tried to get into a lot of different generative video models, and, we're still on the wait list after all these months. So Runway is actually a plug and play tool that we can use.
And it's worth noting that all the work we're showing you is all stuff that we were doing. Like, this isn't from their websites. And in this particular case, like, we're taking a still image render, like this one, for example, and then popping it into the Runway. And we simply said, add people and cars, and keep it, keep the image still, don't move. Yeah, create a time. Thank you. You actually did the prompt for this. I should let you do that. And this was amazing to us. And here's this next one. I'll hit play, Jenn.
Yeah, so we're looking at how we can use these tools in our everyday work, right? How we can win projects, how we can change the way that we're, showing up to projects and what we can do. And so this was actually a video that I put together. All of this is generated from Runway of specific scenes of this kind of mountain ski resort project that is something similar to what we would work on. And it's really just to highlight, programmatic elements. How is the space going to be used? How are people going to interpret things? What does that look seasonally? And this video probably took me an hour to create all the prompts for and generative time, and then 15 minutes to put together in another video editing program, and then probably about $15 worth of credits to create.
So, real quick here. So one of the scenes here, I think it's this one, right? This was actually a still image from one of our projects.
Right? Yeah, and Runway actually took it upon itself to animate the children from that. So you can pick an image to start with, and then it will do its best to animate it.
And here's another one. And then I think real quick, just as a joke, I think I saw Aaron Dietzen from SketchUp in here. Yep, there he is. Look at that. Kind of. Maybe not. Sorry, Aaron. So again, taking a still image render, because that's what we do a lot of, and then being able to pop it in here to create a really quick rendering of this that animates it, makes it interesting. I mean, part of it here is trying to get it to understand scale. But again, like where these tools were 6 months ago to where they are now is kind of amazing.
Well, and it's important to note too that if we animated that manually in Lumion or a rendering program, that plus the processing time would have taken us, 15 times as long.
That's a good point. We'll talk about time in a second, but go ahead about Delve. Do you want me to go to the next one?
No, this is perfect. So Delve is a Google Earth plugin that is AI generative for planning models. You can go to the next one. So this is a quick tutorial that I put together. It's going to show you, you pick a site that you're trying to redevelop. This is a great tool for real estate. It's going to give you it's going to give you 30 different generative ways of how your land use plan would work, where buildings could go, where parking lives, how these areas all interact with each other. And then it actually analyzes each one using AI. So you can put in costs, you can add different types of buildings, you can add all sorts of things, and it's going to give you total cost to build it, total yields on what you're going to make off of it, carbon emissions, all sorts of things. And then it'll actually even analyze, things like sunlight, shade, wind, all sorts of things for each design. And then it allows you to kind of create a plan that you like. And then from there, you can actually put it into Google Earth and take a look at how it's going to work with the context around it.
And we have a planning department that every once in a while we delve back into this and look at it with them.
Yeah, it also allows you to compare models, and really see what the differences are between each plan.
So let's delve into SketchUp Diffusion. I really like this tool. Basically, you build a model in SketchUp, and this is kind of a quick tutorial. I'll go through this. Most important aspect of using SketchUp Diffusion, which is a generative AI tool within SketchUp, is creating a detailed model. So in this case, all the features that I want to appear in my render, my generative render, are here. Building trees, pedestrian lights, cars, textures for locations. So I'm delineating the different aspects of surfaces and pavement. And from there, I can, using a text prompt, I can create a bunch of different generative scenes in which I can take it from there. And I'm constantly refining it. You can regenerate, you can relight them. You have different tools. I'm not even getting into all the tools here. I really like this render, but the trees weren't very realistic to me. I asked it to do another version of it. It got the paving correct. I can always Photoshop different things out. I asked it to relight it, and it did a relight. And one of the things, another tool we're going to talk about here from Topaz Labs, Gigapixel. I then took the final result from SketchUp, and then I popped it into Gigapixel, which lets me increase the resolution of the image so it's actually nice and cogent. So I have a nice presentable image. I would actually show this to a client. I didn't notice until I actually enhanced this image that it put in a background for me too. Didn't notice that, didn't see that. I just thought it was black. It does have some floating trees, so it could use some Photoshop there. But that was the original image versus what it produced. SketchUp Diffusion has some very powerful settings that you don't normally find. And one of the most important things is respect the model geometry. So basically, you're throwing in your model. It's not going to create some unseen, twisted elements. It's really going to work with what you give it. And at the same time, you can influence the prompt influence. So if you want, it's worth playing with this tool. And again, I actually ran this through, I don't know which GPT I ran it through, but I ran it through a bot, and then playing with all these different types of settings. There's also a negative setting to make sure that no things are included. In this case, I said, please do not uplight the trees. And then from there, you can start producing these settings. The other thing you have is you have other styles that you can choose from in the diffusion model: exterior photos, interior photo, realistic, all these pencil sketches. This one I did as an illustration from that rendering. And the other aspect of what you can do, and we're going to delve into another tutorial with Jenn here in a second, is the SketchUp diffusion engine. In SketchUp, you can import in an image of a render. So in this case, I brought this render in that you saw that was animated in Runway, but which was created in Lumion, and I brought it into SketchUp, and now I'm using it as just another diffusion engine. And I gave it a prompt, and it gave me options. So it's not just the fact that you can use it to respect the model geometry, in this case, respect the image, but also bring in that render. This is, again, a separate render in SketchUp that I imported and then used the engine for. This is a pretty unique tool. There's not a lot of options to be able to do this. and it makes SketchUp Diffusion extraordinarily powerful. So here's another example. This is drone-derived geometric data that we use in the terrain model that just then became this. Jen.
Yeah, so this is kind of that piecemeal process that we're going to go through a little bit in some of the next slides. But I really took this model and I put it into SketchUp Diffusion. And then I was able to generate some pretty cool weather effects, things like that. But this really shows you the process. So,
and just real quick note, we do have a video. There's a separate video on this on the YouTube channel on this tutorial.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we went about some of these other ones is we had a Lumion model of that park that we had scanned with a drone. We had built a master plan model in SketchUp. We had added trees, people, full entourage in Lumion, and then we were able to export some still images. And you can see up there in the middle top is some different exports that we did for the Alpha Sky map and the material ID map that helps you really kind of piecemeal this together in Photoshop once you're done. So I took that image, just the raw Lumion image, I imported that into SketchUp. I used the diffusion model on it to get some pretty nice kind of fall, more natural looking renders, because one of my biggest complaints about the Lumion file that I had created was the saturation and all of the materials. It was just really over the top. And so then from there, I was able to kind of pick and pull pieces that I liked. Like I might like trees in one of the diffusion images that I got, but I like the sky on the other one. And so being able to go into Photoshop afterwards and piecemeal all of these areas together, using that material ID map to mask certain things out was really helpful and a really quick way to get a full-blown Photoshop rendering that looked completely different from my model. So this was the original Lumion rendering. You can go to the next one. And that was the after. So, you know, really adding some nice rocks in the river, changing the sky, adding photorealistic trees. You can see kind of some of the parts that are still there. The Lumion cars are still there. The buildings in the background, all of our master plan information there with the grass and the bridge and all of those things are still there. But it really allows you to create a kind of seamless image.
So I'm going to jump in here and talk about custom GPT bots, because you can build your own bots, sort of, and how we did it. Someone in our firm did QA/QC for construction documents. So ChatGPT allows you to go and, if you have I think that you need a paid subscription, but you can create your own custom bots. This was a while ago. I actually took my SketchUp books and information and threw it in there to see what it would do and created SketchUp Buddy. Never used it since. But it's interesting because you could ask it anything and it's going to reference it. I think actually SketchUp built something in like this into SketchUp. I could be wrong. And then Jen, do you want to explain Wingman?
Wingman I created as a joke, basically. And it's just this like funny chat GTP that gives you funny pickup lines that I found, you know, that I traded on from the internet. So it was kind of just a joke, but it is kind of funny to create something that just makes people laugh.
So Devin in our firm, he's one of the shareholders. He's part of our AI committee, and he created a QA/QC bot, and he loved it. I don't know why I'm not playing here. And this is a presentation he gave us. He's like, basically, here's the bot. He's going to feed it. I'm going to fast forward here. He's telling you, this is how you create the bot right here on the left-hand side. It's not very difficult to actually do. Now I'm going to fast forward here, because basically what he's doing here is he's downloading the PDF set, and this is a 35-page CD set planting plan. And he's saying, please help me check planting plan on this project, check quantity and plant types, which is exactly what it did. He's showing the graph. I asked him to show me the documents here that you're using for it, and what did it actually look like. And it gave him the results. It told him, let's go here, because we had to redo this process. So it's going to give him the results of basically doing an audit of those documents. I'm not going to go into the specific details about this. This is something we're doing internally still, but it has a lot of promise to be rolled out to the entire firm. Again, it checked soil amendments. labels and callouts. And then we did another test with a 165-page full CD set from multiple consultants, and it was able to check specifications. It cannot write specs, but we'll talk about that. It found conflicts and collisions. For example, there was a label over an important drawing set. Ad infinitum. There's a lot of information that it gave to us. This is one of those topics that could deserve its own presentation. I'm going to leave enough with that, but this is part of our R&D internally, is being able to do this, and that it is an efficient, time-saving, invisible, simple process. And talking about that, for the generative models, and again, what he was doing with that construction documents was generative. NVIDIA is offering its system. We're still trying to get information about NVIDIA Edify, but it's supposed to be able to allow you to create your own generative bots. Is that correct, Jen?
Yeah, so the way that I understand that it works is that NVIDIA has basically partnered up with Getty Images to create a platform that companies or professionals can actually create their own generative bots and train it on only specific information. So the way that we're looking at it is we would create a generative image model that is only trained on our projects, on work from our company. And so it kind of it would mimic our style of, how we design things.
Oh, Topaz Labs. Topaz Labs has become part of my everyday. I'm just going to show you what it does. So Topaz Labs, video AI. So I'm going to play it on this video. This video is 720p at 25 frame rate. You can see that it's blurry, maybe a little jittery. What this particular tool does, and this is, again, I use these every day now. They're no longer, so basically I throw the final video into Topaz AI, and it lets me upscale it from, in this case, 720p to 1440 or, 2K. And then instead of 30 frame rate or 25 frame rate to 60 frame rate, normally this would take me hours or days to render out correctly on my own system. This is not just a shortcut because it will also sharpen the image. You can apply different filters, and the result is this much more crisp, photorealistic, I'm going to set it here, smoother animation. This is now part of our daily process for the past year. As we were doing this presentation, my subscription for this ran out. I panicked and I told my boss I needed it now. This is something that's going to be standard for everybody because clients have bigger screens, more resolution, everything's getting sharper, and you're going to have to upsize it quickly. So that is Gigapixel. That's Video AI by Topaz Labs. They have multiple tools. The other one is Gigapixel. The other one I absolutely cannot live without. This was a hand sketch done by my friend Jim Leggett. I had a very small version of it, and Gigapixel let me basically supersize it up to 600 times larger, which is immense. Like talking about the size of a building. So I showed you this image before that I grabbed a snapshot from SketchUp Diffusion. I then ran it through Gigapixel. This is Gigapixel showing me, hey, what do you want to upsize this to? It's showing me the pixel density. You can upscale basically 6 times just natively, or you can put a custom option in, but you could see what it did. It actually is extraordinarily crisp in what it does in being able to create these images. It also lets you do batch. So I can render out an animation, dump that as still images, toss it into Gigapixel, and then upsize the resolution and the sharpness, and the result was worth it. I did it for a project that I'm under NDA that I cannot show, but these tools are very legit. So now we're going to go into passive AI. So this is where you no longer need to essentially use your left brain to figure out what you're trying to do. We'll talk about Luma AI here. Jen, if you want to jump into Luma.
Yeah, so Luma AI is actually a AI scanning app that you can get on your iPhone. It basically allows you to walk around an object and take 3 different loops of it, one at the top, one in the middle, and one at the bottom, and then it uploads to their platform on your phone, and then they actually generate a 3D model from that object for you. We've used this for sculpture gardens, for historic sites, for things that we wanted to preserve within our projects. And so these are some of the 3D models that Luma created for us. that then we were able to bring into SketchUp and manipulate if we needed to. And then that top rendering is actually the final project with some of those statues in it.
So here's another one. I was contacted by a principal on a Monday, and he said he needed to do a recorded interview with animation by Friday. I've done multimedia work in the past. It usually takes 2, 3, 4 weeks. We did it in 4 days. This included having to create, the easy part was creating this animation. That's the helicopter flying, all of that. This was done in Lumion. The hard part was then actually creating a script, narration, recording, and everything else that went into it. I asked Chad, Chad, again, everything we're doing in this firm requires all hands on deck, so we're talking about different people in our firm helping us. Chad, I asked him, give me an outline of what this narration has to be. From that point on, I then took GPT-4 as like, take what he did and make this into a narrated script. What is this going to sound like, or what is it going to read like? So he gave me the outline, ChatGPT gave me the script. I then found another AI tool. I don't know what this one is called. I'm going to hit play. But basically, took the script that ChatGPT generated. I needed to hear what it sounded like.
Influence. My experience spans from designing parks and open spaces to corporate campuses and urban frameworks. At Confluence.
You get the idea. It lets me choose voices, but I was able to do flow and then edit the script again. Perfect. I then gave that script to Chad, told him to sit down with his iPhone and start recording.
About Confluence.
Poor Chad. He's a very private guy. I'm sorry. Great guy, too. So from that, I got all these recordings, and then I used Adobe Podcast. And this is, if you have an Adobe account, you can get this. This thing's amazing as well. This is basically an entire audio studio and clean up in one place. We were then able to throw everything together and clean it up with Adobe Audio.
Work of 9 award-winning offices.
Yeah, clean audio.
13 to tap into a diverse pool of experts across various specialties.
We ended up winning the project, but it was this combination of tools and AI tools, from ChatGPT to narration to audio cleanup to video merging, that let us be able to do this. And that's all passive. Again, this is where it's invisible. And here's another big one. And we're going to talk about rendering because that's what we do. This is the rendering tools that we use within our office or have tried, but in some ways, we're very multilingual in terms of rendering programs across 9 offices. One of the things that we wanted to test was what people's preferences were about rendering. So we actually did a survey, both internal and external, and we didn't tell people what program produced these renders, just that it did, and that it was, no post-processing. And what we discovered was everybody scored 2.5. In essence, it was a statistical tie. There was no winner here. Like on not just one render, but 2, 3, 4 renders, like pretty much nobody had a preference, which just talks about how subjective renderings really are. When you hear someone say, hey, that rendering looks really good, why can't you do that? Yeah, point them to this survey. So what does that mean? So first and foremost, we're going to talk about Unreal Engine because you're seeing this pop online now. It's not the only one, but this tool's amazing. And they have technologies now that they've rolled out. The big thing about them is they can process an infinite amount of geometry and an infinite texture size, which is right. We're supersizing the textures. Now we have GPUs that can basically run as much geometry as you want. So I'm following the video game world, and D5 Render, which I'll demo, which I'll show you, which we do use, uses Unreal Engine, which we love it. I also demo alpha test video games. This one's called PAX Day. And it's not the fact that they're just building these kind of amazingly beautiful sceneries. They're building the tool sets to actually build them. So the players build everything. The buildings are built by the players. They're giving you the tool sets, these 3D automated tool sets to build all these things. So the gaming industry is kind of merging with where we are. So why D5? I love D5. This tool is just beautiful, from the parallax to the night renders to the photorealism. But again, it's backed up by an AI backbone where they have the ability to do AI generated textures. That's a big deal because then they can make them seamless. They're using AI atmosphere for the HDRI to really make your renders pop in terms of the atmosphere and the content that you're providing it to. It can go in there and like Gigapixel, upsize your textures using an AI algorithm, probably the same one that Gigapixel does, just modified. and then matching. So again, like everything that's going on with the rendering world is AI focused as well. And you get these kind of really beautiful results in terms of what we've been able to get with D5. And we have a perpetual license for this tool, and it's being used exclusively actually right now by Bennett Ridley in our Denver office. He was actually able to do these renders in D5. The problem he got into was when he showed these to the clients, they wanted him to match the planting plan exactly, which I think is what he ended up doing. But usually it's the other way around. You do the planting plan and then you go and do the render. In this case, he did the render, but he's been using D5 as part of a continuous process over what he likes over how to use that. So this is the example of, again, D5. And then there's the other one. We tested a lot of render engines. We also use Enscape and we have V-Ray that we use in different offices. But across the board, our preference is Lumion 2024. This tool's amazing. It's, again, like Lumion when it first came out. Jenn did this render. The mandate I've given everybody in the firm is to please do evening, night renders, really make things pop. And this thing really popped. And again, that's the AI capabilities behind the ray tracing that, they have ray tracing here, supports all the natural items, glass, bouncing off light, Lumion. You're able to really do some amazing stuff with doing lighting now, which is what I always wanted to do. And if you look at the really good, amazing rendering artists like Alex Hagraf, they're basically doing a lot of dusk night renders. So we're finally able to emulate these kind of what these masters and pros have done on a more seamless level for ourselves to get to these renders. Again, we're doing lots and lots and lots of these kind of renders and tests at night. What you're seeing in here is also another thing I didn't include in this presentation, but Parallax, which are these holograms of interiors that you place within models. One of them is Roombox by SketchUp, and also Lumion and D5 have these interiors that you can light up and then place in these buildings and make them look photorealistic. Again, these are more examples of it. There's another rendering. We're going to talk about this bridge next. This is a bridge I did with Patrick at Alvarad in the designer at Confluence, and it was all about lighting. And we'll talk about lighting again, because lighting's the big theme here, being able to do that and how that all works. But we're going to talk about drones here. I'm going to jump in. This is Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And why drones? Drones are also the original AI. Drones are based off AI. Everything about a drone is AI driven. We have a pretty substantial drone practice at Confluence. Jenn, if you want to talk about these, because this is your project here.
Yeah, so the first week I think that I worked at Confluence, I flew to Sioux Falls to do 3D scans for all of Falls Park, which was huge. It took us a whole week of flying, and then another, 3 to 6 months to process all the data to actually create a 3D model from that. But this is just kind of showing you a proposed overlook that they were going to add to the park, and some outflow structures to keep the river at a certain height, and just kind of showing you the importance of drones and how we can use them in our workflows to create these really hyper realistic photo matches.
In our firm, again, like we used just videos, we take lots of photos, it's become ubiquitous. I think this one's funny, Jenn, because of the fact that we put this photo in, I was like, my God, that looks like Midjourney, right?
Yeah, so we actually fly to different offices when we have new drone pilots and do hands-on training with them so that they kind of get to see the process and how it works, and what kind of images we can really get with a drone. I think these are mostly from our Chicago office, Des Moines, and Minneapolis.
So why drones? Again, like you can get this high resolution aerial out of this to the point where you can see all the way down to the ground, and you can see linen written on the bottom left. This becomes part of our process in terms of graphics as well, where we can do these really amazing photo matches, again, using drones 3D modeling. The drone, to manage our drone studio, it's all AI backbone. So here, right, this is air data that was set up, and we can track the drones, the batteries, the flights, the pilots across 9 offices. There are crashes. You can track the crashes. Sometimes you have to ask the pilot for the log, but at the same time, you could see that everything here, this is kind of your own air traffic control system and flight log system. That's one stop, one shop. And again, everything is AI driven. we flew Falls Park. We're able to derive this drone data from it. What does that mean? So what you're looking at here is images of point cloud data derived from a drone flight. It was a little crazy how to capture this at the time. And you're seeing how this is the drone flight, and what the drone captures is a snapshot or image that's then assembled into the whole thing. So drones are really a big part of what we do as well. And that's not going to stop. The track they're on is clearly, if you follow the news and what's going on with some conflicts, that drones are here to stay and only going to get smarter. And we're not even touching the surface. Another AI case study, another SketchUp tool is Scan Essentials. So this works. You can take point cloud data and import it into SketchUp using this tool and then view it. And then on top of it, you can create a terrain model out of it. Real quickly, I'll show you in a video here how that works. Hopefully this is quick. But basically, I'm going in using Scan Essentials. I'm locating the point cloud data for this particular project. And then I can it's going to ask me to create. So there's the point cloud data. It's a million kilobytes. And then I'm going to create a reference file, RWP file. Sorry, the data set was a gig or a million bytes. And then it's going to import that information in. This might take a couple of minutes. I think I paused the video here, just let it finish. And then when it's done, you always have to remember to hit zoom extents. Was being stubborn about letting me hit zoom extents. And then it's going to show you the point cloud data. And then you can manipulate how that point cloud data is viewed. You have different settings on Scan Essentials. This is an amazing tool. Again, another SketchUp tool a lot of people don't know about. That's extraordinarily powerful for the type of work that you could do. But even the best part, because at this point, we ask people for their point cloud data. Please give us your point cloud data so we can create the terrain model in SketchUp. And there's lots of different tools here. I'm not going into the details again. This tool can use its own half-hour presentation on how it works, but I'll just show you that it did create the terrain for me right there. I turn it off. I'm going to create some pseudo contours for it here in a second, I believe, just to show you what that looks like. But again, very powerful in terms of what these tools can do. Fast forward here. You see, I use another extension to create contours. I'll turn that off, and then you can see the contour file. So I talked about PlaceMaker and being able to import in all this geodata. And geodata is a really big part of the AI world, right? Because facial recognition software, which was really pioneered early in the 2000s, then is being used in all sorts of places. And what people are doing is applying it to aerials, high resolution aerials. So companies like Ecopia and Nearmap, which we have relationships with in terms of PlaceMaker, can now go on the right-hand side. You can see this information. They can quantify through an aerial all the information on the ground plane to start giving you data sets like PlaceMaker. So what does this mean if you can get pavement, parking, road, all the different aspects that make up these points? Well, the future is you're going to be able to build one-click derived 3D existing models of locations. That's not fiction. That's coming pretty quickly on the horizon. And that's going to change a lot of stuff in terms of what kind of data you start with. So for example, this might be on demand. Here's an aerial, a drone-derived aerial, an aerial that was tossed into this, not facial recognition, but aerial recognition software. It then created a CAD drawing with layers and very clean orthogonal line work for that process. And here you could see, I think this, I just need to go to the next slide to show that information. And that's actually better than what you're going to get from a surveyor. No offense to the surveyors. It's just, this is where the future is going. And then, a company like Ecopia, you can contact them right now, and you give them 6 weeks and $2,000, and they'll give you 2 kilometers worth of this data that's accurate, down to the driveways, down to the paths. Again, this is something I talk about year in, year out, and it's a slow moving thing. I've been talking about this particular data sets for the past 7 years, and it's only going to become more ubiquitous. So we're going to go on to the next part here, which, beyond AI is parametrics. So right, you saw all this generative models and they lack precision. And where you have precision is really, again, like something like Urban Paint, which I'm just plugging again here real quick, which automates the creation of streetscapes. One of my favorites by Chuck Valley is the SketchUp extensions instant architecture, which again is part of our daily reality. And these are parametric tools. And it's a matter of time before they merge and shake hands with AI. And God knows what that's going to look like. A tool like PlusSpec is another example. And then I'm going to talk about LightUp because I fell in love with this tool in terms of parametrics. So this is a bridge we were working on in Sioux Falls in Cedar Rapids called Cedar Rapids Connect. And we started doing all these renderings, and especially at night. Well, then we got these renderings from the lighting designer. And the poor lighting designer did not have any budget. And they were using 3ds Max, and they were using IES profiles to create these renders. Well, we took Lumion, and we took Enscape, and we took the programs D5, and they allow you to put in IES profiles. We could not match what was being completed by the lighting designer. And we were being tasked with designing the lighting for this bridge. Well, that's a liability because this is not my Lumion render. Once this lighting goes in, it's not going to look like what they did here. And this became problematic the more we went through it. So we started researching different types of software that we can use. And what we discovered is that, well, 3ds Max was originally designed as a lighting program. Hence, it could accurately display IES profiles. Lumion, D5, and all the Chaos Group stuff, no offense to all these people, unfortunately for them, you can't accurately emulate IES profiles. You can't do, no matter the subscattering surfaces, doesn't matter, not going to be accurate. So we started panicking and started looking into professional lighting software. And I finally went to the SketchUp forums, and lo and behold, got introduced to LightUp. And this tool is ridiculously amazing, and especially because it's letting me do lighting. So what does it do? Lets you do, there's not a lot of places. First and foremost, there's not a lot of places where you can do lighting design like this. You can either do it with these professional programs, like AGI 32 and Dialux, or you can do it with 3ds Max, which is an investment on itself. But to do it in SketchUp, well, that's great. So you can put the light source in, like the professional softwares, it's showing you the profile, it's showing you the profile on where it's going to show its light, and then you can render it. So this was the 3ds Max render. Now, the coloring and the ambiance don't match between these renders, but the lighting output does, because this is rendered inside SketchUp. So it's rendering it, it's creating the light up model. We did a whole bunch of studies like this. So how do we light the cables? Do we light the outside of the pillar? We did probably 30, 40 renders. And we made money off of this because 150% on the investment into light up itself. We actually even did lighting studies for the interior, and this was all possible because of light up. We wouldn't have been able to outdo it. Now we know that we can do this. We're actually offering lighting services as part of what we're doing. Light up gives you all these other outputs. So these are called LUX. This is the LUX contour map to show you where the light is or is not hitting. These are professional diagrammatics, lighting diagrams that we are able to produce all this, including to send the model as an FBX export to the lighting designers to confirm if we did it. They loved that because they had no budget. We had to end up doing that work. And the end result was being able to actually use this tool. So again, going back, this is all about parametrics. Don't forget about parametrics. Don't forget about parametrics. They're powerful, like there's Rhino, all these other tools. I'm going to talk about that in a second as well. But the parametric aspect is where we've all been for the past 15 years. It's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's really combining the parametrics with AI, because then you're telling AI how to be precise. So hopefully we'll see more of that. I know some companies like Land Effects and that are doing that. Other AI. So mentioning Rhino and Grasshopper, it's not an easy tool, won't lie, but there's parametrics in there that work within Rhino, and there's AI for construction documents that you can figure it out with Rhino. To give SketchUp kudos here, there's a lot of other stuff I haven't mentioned that SketchUp is doing that's also AI driven. But then there's other things like there's these tools for managing your calendar. I was working with somebody, said, let's meet tomorrow at a certain time. I was going to go schedule it. He used AI. It was already there. It was kind of creepy. We're talking about looking at specs. So Deltek apparently purchased Master Spec. I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems they have a relationship and they're applying AI to spec and spec writing. Autodesk, love them or hate them. They are always at the forefront and have been at the forefront of generative work for a very long time. And now they really have some interesting tools for generative floor plans. What's interesting is the way they do the generative floor planning for buildings is they're using planning terms like region, street, plaza. So this is going to apply in a broader set. Nearmap is amazing. We use them all the time. I have a relationship with them. All my projects start with Nearmap, with PlaceMaker and Nearmap. It's because it's high resolution aerials and all this data-driven designed information. And this is up and coming. Silo Geo. Met them recently, and they are going to provide geodata that we can all use and need. So that was a lot of information. We actually did it in 1 hour and 6 minutes, which is kind of impressive. Thought it would go longer. But again, there's a lot here to go over. So just leave it with the notion that AI is real. A lot of these tools probably don't work. They might. It depends on their investment. And it's really finding workflows and becoming the expert in doing it. I know that it's taking a group of us within our company to do it. This is not one person. This is several. And the process in itself is daunting sometimes, but we're finding the case uses. So for example, something like Runway, where we're investing our money is in tools like Runway and the Lumion rendering and the D5 renders. But it's finding all these tools. Are there broader, bigger pictures that are going to happen with AI? Absolutely. But keep it seamless. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jenn. Any last words?
I don't think so. I think you covered it.
All right. Thank you very much.